Well, welcome everyone to Lessons from the Field. As you know, this is a series of interviews we do with a diverse array of guests, all who have a common thread, and that is a passion for pharmacy and pharmaceutical sciences. Today, we're very fortunate to be featuring Debbie Piscitelli. She's a graduate from our PharmD program, 1989, and she's now owner of Triangle Medical Writing, LLC. First of all, Dr. Piscitelli, thank you for being with us. For those of you who have seen this before, we'll ask a series of questions that will elicit insight into Dr. Piscitelli's career and some of her insights and advice for our students, alumni, and friends who might be listening, those that are starting their careers or are still in school. So let's just get started with a brief overview, if you don't mind, Debbie, to walk us through your career in maybe 3 minutes or so.
Sure. Well, thank you for taking the time to interview me for this episode. So when I finished pharmacy school, I decided I wanted to learn more. I thought I needed a little bit more experience. So I chose to do a residency, and that was at Duke in North Carolina. And then at the end of that, I kind of thought, well, what do I want to do with this? What else can I do with my degree? And so I did a cardiology fellowship back at UIC. At the end of that, I took a job at a pharmaceutical company, Fujisawa, in their clinical pharmacology department. And that was a good experience because I learned more. And then as life moves you around the country, we moved to Maryland, and I took a job at the Pharmacokinetics Biopharmaceutics Lab at Baltimore School of Pharmacy. And I was there for several years. Again, had the opportunity to learn quite a bit of research while I was there. Then I actually took a bit of time off and then created my company, Triangle Medical Writing.
Great. Well, and I will point out that we were residents at the same time at UIC, and I remember you fondly during that time, and your husband, Steve, as well. And now we're, how many years out? 20 years or more?
More.
Yeah, more like 30, but anyway, we won't talk time. So a lot of our students are interested in kind of knowing a little bit more about the day-to-day activities of our guests, because they may know a little bit about what that job is generally, but not what it entails from a day-to-day or typical week kind of standpoint. So your medical writing company and career, if you could just tell us a little bit more about that and what you're doing.
Sure. My day-to-day, well, the way that I work with my company is I contract with pharmaceutical companies primarily, and I charge by the hour, and I write documents. And the documents that are needed to submit to the FDA for drug approval, basically. So that could be a protocol, instructions to a study, could be a report. Once the study is done, it needs to be written up. Investigator brochure. Every study at a site needs an investigator brochure to tell the investigator all about up-to-date knowledge of the drug and where it is in the development stage. And then you start putting things together for the new drug application and all the components that go with that. So mostly it would be whatever document I'm working on in whatever company. There could be meetings involved now via Zoom, but prior I worked with a company that I could go into the office and work, or I could work at home. Sometimes companies would like me on their drug development team for a certain drug, for a certain disease state. So you may sit on a meeting where you could discuss everything from a formulation issue to a study issue to, strategy for putting the application to send to the FDA. So basically it depends on my personal life when I'm doing my work life and how to fit it in.
I was just going to ask you that. It sounds like very flexible, and kind of decide how much you want to work and with
Correct.
whom. We have a lot of students interested in medical writing, though it's great to be able to have somebody that we're interviewing that's in that area. This is not something on our list of questions that I was going to ask you, but for those students that are interested in medical writing, what recommendations might you have for them to get in experience or involved in that early on, like as students?
Well, that is, I was trying to think about that from a student standpoint. I would say one option is when you're talking to some of your professors, if they are doing some research and getting involved with that. I know that when I was doing my fellowship, it was under Jerry Bauman, and he did a lot of writing. He would take a study and he could, do multiple manuscripts off of a study. So I would probably, one area, just talk to different professors and see if there is research or if you can assist in writing, even if maybe you're not working necessarily and doing all the research. Because as I think in pharmacy, a lot of manuscripts are being written or abstracts are being sent or posters to meetings. Those are all valuable experiences from writing. I know that there is an American Medical Writers Association. I am not a part of it right now, but it might be a good resource as a student and then as a professional as well. I would say that. I did not really go through pharmacy school looking for writing opportunities. In fact, I don't know necessarily I would have considered myself comfortable writing, or, that would have been my forefront talent. I would not have looked at it that way. But I will say the more you do, the more you become comfortable. And when you are writing for a company, I often, if I'm starting with a brand new company, I'll say, do you have a template to follow? Do you have a style guide you would like me to follow? Are there examples of something? This is our gold standard, our ideal document that we want followed. Okay. So it's not like you start with a blank sheet of paper and have to come up with everything on your own.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned the piece about writing. Typically, you're not just born to write, basically. At least most people, and it takes a lot of practice and experience and different styles, and also with medical writing, it's very different than other kinds of writing. So it does take a lot of time, and getting that experience early probably is a good thing for students.
And I will say, I would probably just, as you're maybe coming to the end of school, deciding where and what you want to do. If you have the opportunity to do maybe an advanced training like a residency or fellowship, and I'm not even sure if there are fellowships in medical writing. I think there are probably I know there are fellowships in like medical affairs. That may be something to look at. There are contract resource organizations that hire entry-level writers, because there is such a need. I mean, I do turn down work. I don't want to work 24 hours a day. If you think of all the companies that are trying to get drugs approved, there's just so much writing. And then you add on manuscripts, or you add on, posters, or, like I said, a multitude of writing. But contract resource organizations also hire entry level type and writers that they could train.
And probably drug information work is somewhat similar in that there's a lot of writing sometimes with
Correct.
So.
I don't do like patient forward writing, but there is that's a whole nother area that you could get into that involves writing.
Yeah. Well, great. Thank you for that insight. And I thought maybe we could just step back a little bit to your time here at UIC. I know you were either in the first or the second class that graduated with the PharmD program, as it is now, the entry-level PharmD. Could you tell us a little bit about your time here and the experience you got here, and how that was helpful over the different phases of your career?
Well, I mean, I would say comes to mind immediately is I believe I was in the second class of PharmD. And I just felt like UIC was, forward thinking, cutting edge. I had a classmate who was thinking of dropping out and saying, what do I need this PharmD for? I just want to go and get a BS degree. She didn't. So I felt like UIC was preparing me for something I didn't even know I needed to be prepared for. I didn't have to then go back and get a PharmD. I was prepared for the future. So I kind of feel like that's how I look at UIC, is they're thinking about how to prepare their students for the future, and investing in that. That would be number one. And then two, it's hard to separate my fellowship experience from my undergrad, maybe because it's farther back, I don't know. But doing my fellowship, I just got a good experience of what I would say drug development. The first year we did, I know they do it differently now, so this is like back in the day, but the first year we took, we were doing rounds, and again, I just did cardiology. You could do the VA and arrhythmias, and so we did cardiology rotations, and then we also did a research project, kind of the second year, started at the first year. And so you saw the whole thing, right? So when you're talking about drug development, you're developing a drug that needs studying, okay, and you write that up, but it's going to patients and you then monitor it. So it really gave me that good experience. And doing it with having my fellowship with Jerry Bauman, again, I'll go back to, I think I still was a little intimidated about writing, and how he was just so fluent. He could just write so easily. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's just not me. But I guess obviously I absorbed it, because then we kind of came full circle. And then you alluded to it already, but I met my husband during the fellowship. He was doing the infectious disease fellowship, and actually next week will be 30 years of marriage.
Yes,
worked out.
Well, and that reminds me that I met my wife at a party at your apartment, and we're coming up on our 30-year anniversary as well.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
Worked out for
well,
both of us.
and you too. I mean, yeah, having trained with Jerry Bauman, who's now, of course, the editor of the Journal of the American College of Clinical Pharmacy, shows that you got some excellent experience in writing. So learn from the best.
Agreed.
So after you finished the fellowship, then you went to work for pharmaceutical industry. I guess maybe could you tell us a little bit about how you made the decision to do that versus other options that you might have had, and then I know you changed companies as you moved a little bit, but maybe some of the decisions that you had to make or choices you had to make along the way.
Sure. When I finished my fellowship, when I finished my residency, I thought to myself, okay, the entire time through school, all my training, I kept saying, what can I do with this degree? What can I do with it? What are my options? What jobs could I have? What gives me the most flexibility? I never stopped asking that question. So when I was done with my fellowship, I thought to myself, do I think I'm going to care about patients creating clearance 20 years from now? And I'm like, I just don't know. And then I thought, well, what else? Well, what's this fellowship stuff all about? And so that's why I did the fellowship. And when I got to the piece of you creating your protocol, you executing a study, you analyze your data, you write it up, I was like, oh, this is what I like. I'm doing now what I like, that I think I can do for the future. Now, don't get me wrong. I feel like everything from dispensing to clinical pharmacy to learning research were tools in my, toolbox, and that throughout my career, I felt like I could pick and choose which parts of my education and training I could use based on, that period of my life. And at that time, I was very interested in the whole research component. So that's why I started looking for jobs in pharmaceutical companies. And I liked it. And so what happened is I got married, and my husband took a job with the NIH. So that brought us to the East Coast. And I ended up working for the pharmacokinetics biopharmaceutics lab, which was probably a little bit more data analysis. We did population PK and did actually goes back in the day again. I'm glad I'm talking to someone in my age
Of your
ballpark.
vintage, yeah.
But they had a contract with the FDA to start doing data sets for electronic submissions, because prior to that, it was via paper in a truck that they drove to the FDA. And so I was involved with the computer people at UMBC, University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and the FDA to start seeing how they can start doing an electronic submission. So I just got, again, I liked all of that. And then at that point I worked, I had my first child and I started 2 days in the office, 1 day at home. And long story short, it just didn't work. I mean, I think if it was a job share thing, it just didn't work. So I stopped working for a bit, and we moved to Maryland. We moved to North Carolina at the time. And at that point I was like, okay, now, like, I kind of spread out all of my education and all of my experiences. And I said, what do I want to do now? What can I do? And then I kind of settled in. I think I'm going to do this medical writing. I'm going to form a company. I'm going to work for myself, and I'm going to contract. And that way it goes back to what we spoke about, flexibility, and it turns out, yes, if my child had a field trip, I could go on it. My parents were ill in another state, I could go there. And it just gave me the most flexibility.
Yeah, well, that's great. As you think back on overall that time, as you know, where did you feel, and maybe it's related to what you felt like you were most passionate about in terms of the work you're doing, but where you had the most significant impact is the question I wanted to ask. And a lot of people that we talk to are, that's patient care, where they've intervened in, a particular patient's life or something like that. But it'll be interesting to hear, like, from your standpoint, what is the work that you've done where you felt like you've had the most impact, and why, I guess?
Well, you do not need to be a pharmacist or have the training that I have to be a medical writer. There are medical writers who have English degrees, biology degrees, PhDs and things. But I feel I contribute because I get the whole picture. And it just is part of my training to be able to create this document. And what I really like, I get excited about, you take all the different components, you take the protocol, you take the statistical analysis plan, you take the results, you then tell the story. And then I feel like if you can make it easy for the FDA, I like to have documents in easily digestible pieces, so it's easy to read. I've read terrible documents. I've been asked to fix documents for companies. So I feel like my impact is making it easy for the FDA to get through a document, understand it, and get the drug approved faster, right? If somebody reading the document should not have to work to understand what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
And so you don't even have to explain it, because I feel like it's baked into my education and my training that I can't think any other way than a pharmacist or a pharmacist who has some drug development research experience. I would say that, that would be mostly the impact.
Great. Well, and I think you've already kind of answered the next question, but I'll ask it again in case you have anything you want to add. But how have you made your career work for you? You've obviously done that by developing your own company and in a way that allows you to do what you want to do outside of work flexibly. But if there's anything you want to add to that?
I would just offer advice to others if they look at their careers and look at what their talents are and how they have gone over their career, and see what components they could then maybe make into their own company or contract. Or now, again, after the pandemic shutdown, things are a little bit more flexible for people can work at home. There are more job shares. I know statisticians who split the week. So there's a little bit more flexibility now than there was back,
Mhm.
a lot of years ago. But the other component or the other way I make it work for me is earlier on when I did have kids at home, I did more of a sequential. I would work with one company and then the next and then the next. That way I could advertise that I could turn things around quickly. If you work with a CRO, they have standard timelines. You'll get one review 10 days later, not two. So I felt like that was an advertising marketing
Yeah,
thing for me. I could turn things around. So I kind of stayed with one company sequentially, but now I've moved up to, I think I'm up to about 4 or 5, juggling timelines a little bit more. So that works. I have more time now, and my kids
yeah,
are out of the house, and still working around, vacations and,
yeah.
things like that. But I can add more hours if, if the opportunity presents.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate your comments. I think that a lot of folks in pharmacy sometimes may forget the opportunities that might be there for developing your own company and taking your expertise and using it the way you have. I'm sure that I wanted to ask you the medical writing, like your expertise and all of that that you put into your work is, I'm sure you're very comfortable with. What about the business side of it? Did you have to develop that marketing of yourself and, the financial, like, what do I charge and how was that? Was that interesting? And
True. Well, I made sure I set everything up using lawyers because I didn't want to find out I did it wrong.
yeah,
So
right.
I didn't go on the internet and do it that way. I thought, I want to make sure
A
it's
real lawyer.
legit from from the foundation. After that, it does become a little bit of a small world. There is a little bit of networking and talking to people. I was fortunate in two ways. One, because my husband's in drug development as well, and he, gets asked often, do you do you know any medical writers? Sometimes he'll say no, and sometimes he'll say yes. Um, that was one way. The other, being in North Carolina, there are a lot of pharmaceutical companies. So
Yeah,
you would networking a little bit to get your foot in the door, and then after that, it's word of mouth. So
yeah,
there was a company that I worked for, it was Pharmaset, and it was bought by Gilead. And so when all of the people ended up at some point dispersed, okay, that's how many more companies they all went to that they need a medical writer. They went back to call me because I had started working with them. So I did not have to really form a website or advertise or really market very much at all. It really, once you kind of get into a company, it becomes word of mouth, and it becomes like right now I work for friends or friends of friends, pretty much.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's great. Well, thank you for that. I guess the last question I wanted to ask was going kind of back to the flexibility in the job that you have. That's often something that our students and others will ask about as they kind of starting to look at their careers and the different options that are out there. Sometimes weekends or shift work. So besides starting your own career, I guess, which is obviously something that might help create some flexibility. Do you have other tips on balancing work and home life and all of that?
Um, well, I mean, I would assume that now there is more flexibility
Yeah,
um, that you could kind of work around. But I do think that making sure that it is somewhat balanced makes you better at both jobs. If you spend it all your time working and not at home with, or with hobbies, if you um, live alone. But I think that you need to make sure you spend time with both, or else you don't do either very well.
mhm,
Would be kind of my approach. But I had I appreciate you having me as an episode because a lot of times when you talk about careers in pharmacy, it feels like you default to the people who are like, okay, I am just on a trajectory to be a tenured faculty. I'm a trajectory to be, I don't know, VP, senior VP
Uh-huh.
of some company. And although maybe I didn't have this strong trajectory to be, the top of my field, I really have had a very fulfilling career and enjoy what I do. And I could not be any happier with the balance I have,
Yeah.
my work life and a home life.
And really, that's the most important thing, right? Happiness and your family. And in the end, what you do in your career is typically not quite as important, those other things. And I think you've done great. I think a lot of people would be very envious of what you've done. So thank you, Deb, for spending time with this. Has been really fun. It's great to connect with you again. And I guess any final words of advice for our students as they're taking classes, they're kind of looking to the future and trying to position themselves. Any final words of advice for them?
I would just say be open to opportunities and realize that there may be opportunities that you don't know of yet. And so just keep asking and keep talking to people. What do you do? What do you do? What other options are in your company? What can I do with my degree? Just keep
Yeah.
asking, because there's a lot
Oh,
there's a lot out there. And I don't necessarily think pharmacy schools can have, a pathway to everything. But just be open and have conversations, and you'll be surprised what presents itself.
yeah. Well, that's so true. It's one of the reasons we're doing these interviews and bringing people like you who have done some things that are a little bit alternative. And yeah, you're so right. There's so many things in pharmacy, or even outside of pharmacy, that like you, you are using that training, but it's not necessarily a pharmacy job that you're doing. You don't have to be a licensed pharmacist, obviously, to
Right,
be a medical writer. But
right.
well, thank you, Deb.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
this has been
Great.
fun.
Yes, I agree. Thanks.